All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this live on Manager Fundamentals How to Set Yourself Up for Sustainable Success. I'm delighted to have a conversation with a dear friend and a client of mine, Ravi Tata. The only way I can describe Ravi, he's an engineer's engineer. He grew up the ranks from an engineer, and in his last role, he was a senior director at Walmart Labs. And he's someone who's very well recognized by his peers and his team, not just for his technical acumen, but for the managerial mindset and the people skills that he has. And today we are going to talk about a number of different things. First, we're going to start off by talking about the key skills that we feel that managers need to have, common mistakes that they can avoid, certain mindsets that they can embrace in order to show up better and to set themselves up for sustainable success. What are some self-care techniques that they can do? And finally, we are going to touch upon, if you're watching this, what are the immediate 2 to 3 action that you can take in order to be a successful manager at your work. Welcome, Ravi. It's a delight to have you.
Thank you, Manoj. Great to have you be
Awesome.
here.
So let's start off with this, Ravi. What do you think are the key skills that managers need to build, whether they are experienced or new? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think just to set some context around management and my journey into just how it happened. The usual path to management, uh, is basically there's not like a set path like engineering, right? Like you go do your computer science degree, you basically are like first few years of your career, you're like an engineer going through ranks and all, and you come to a point where there's this bifurcation that happens in your career around like we call this the individual contributor track versus the management track.
Yeah.
And that's really the first time I think all of us get exposed to this concept of what a manager is, what is management. And it basically also is like the first time we see like how this is different from being a engineer. So to me I think before talking about a little bit of skills, the first thing what I've come to realize or see is basically that it's not the same role. Being an engineer is
Yeah.
very different than being a manager. So that's the one first thing all of us, I think, knowingly come into the role without knowing what to expect out of the role. And we stumble upon the role, we try to do the same things as like what we used to do as an engineer. You probably could have been a great engineer, rock star engineer, but you you'll end up seeing like, hey, why am I not kind of like uh, either moving in the same in a career wise, like I'm maybe not making progress, or like what is it that there's something different. And that's when we kind of realize that okay, there needs to be, I need to learn what management is about. So and that is the first aha moment that once you start understanding what leadership and management is about, you'll see that it is its own thing. It's a completely different set of skills. Completely, what, as they say, what got you here will not get you there.
Yeah.
It really, it is true that once you get into management, it's a completely different ball game. And so to me, coming to your question around like what are the necessary skills or what is really the difference here is, once you start getting into management, it's not so much about you anymore. It's not about you as an individual who
Yeah.
we are all used to till then. Like I'm the one doing it, I'm the one delivering it. It's my design, it's my, and versus it's now about people. It's now about like, yeah,
Yeah, and Ravi, I'm just going to call out the image behind you because what you are talking about is really the manager mindset.
yeah,
It's not about me; it's about the people I serve as a mindset. And
right.
once we embrace that mindset, it can shift the way we show up for work.
Yes, it is really a change in mindset. As you said, like it's a completely new way of thinking,
Hmm.
and what you do on a day-to-day basis, how you execute, how you operate, is completely different as a manager. So, so first, it's about not about you; it's about the people, it's about the team.
Yeah.
So the focus moves from being an individual to a team, and kind of like starting to understand what that means is completely different thing. What does it mean to be now operating as a running leading a team? What is it? What should I be even doing for people, right? So folks who come into it, and second thing, why we want to get into management is really about the impact that you can have.
Right.
So being an individual contributor, you have a type of impact, I would say. But being a manager, you can actually do a lot more, and that's what kind of like motivates you. Like those are the two things I would say. One is being, it's not about you, it's about the people and the team. So ability to lead a set of folks on your team towards a goal, and then being to influence a lot more and have a bigger impact for the organization.
Beautiful. And I want to kind of call out what you said because it's so powerful. A lot of people end up choosing to become a manager because, they
Yeah.
feel it's a natural next step. I'll get
Right.
to earn more, I'll have a better title. But then somewhere along the journey, they feel stuck, right?
Yes.
And I think it's key to kind of distinguish between what's the best path for me based on, my strengths and what I care about. Is it the individual, contributor track, or is it the
Yeah.
management? And I think that's something which, unfortunately, a lot of new managers
Yeah.
don't do the inner work to kind of figure that out. What do you
Right.
think?
Yeah, no, that's a great segue into this thing, right? I mean, really, how do I even know whether I want to get into management? That's the next question that naturally pops up, to all the people who have been doing really well on the individual contributor track, but they always keep seeing that, hey, being a manager seems to have better perks,
Yeah.
and you can actually be a lot more visible. There needs to the probably all the some of the visible side of things seem to be happening more on this side, not on the individual track, and that's when that kind of starts becoming the motivating factor, if you may. But that's where, like, as leaders and managers, we need to educate the team and really basically set that ground understanding around like what it means to be a manager, and really talking about it, because like um, you know educating them around like what it really means, and basically are they ready, right?
Yeah.
Is that something you want to do? Because like sometimes like you can provide them those opportunities, right? But you can do it in a way that it can be less kind of like stressful for them, because like a lot of times it is stressful for first time managers.
Oh, yeah.
uh, as they come into the role, it's like everything is new, and how do you really navigate this whole new role and new way of leading, right?
And,
So that's where, like, as leaders, we can have that conversation. And really, I feel that this is one where managers and leaders need to start, can help the teams, really making that very clear and obvious in terms of like what it is to be a manager. And
right.
I, most of the times, I don't see we doing that or taking the time to educate, and then by the time to get in and start being the role, we already are, it's a little too late, and we start having those expectations. So
And
we got
Ravi,
time. Yeah.
I'm going to call you out because I know you do this with your team, with every single member of your team. You constantly get curious about wanting to know what they want, the direction they want to
Yeah.
go. You constantly educate them on the different paths and what it takes to
Yeah.
be a manager and set themselves up, right? So I think people watching this, if you are an experienced manager and you have a team of manager reporting into you, that's a great point that you want. Really get curious about your team. You are not just a manager, an evaluator. You are also a mentor, and so you want to kind of really get to know them and get to kind of provide them that clarity. The other thing that I'm going to touch upon, Ravi, which is super important, is you mentioned that managers are often stressed and overwhelmed. That's because I feel that there's two roles that they are handling. One is the earlier role, which is I am an expert in execution. Like I am supposed to have my, hands on every single thing that is important. And then the second piece is, they get feedback about this. You need to develop executive communication. You need to improve your influence. You need to develop executive presence. You need to go and now present in front of leaders and develop your public speaking capacity. So there's a whole host of newer skills that show up, but nobody really teaches them uh, how do you do that? Because there are certain things that you need to let go of, and a
Yeah.
lot of managers that I coach are the ones who are stressed. It's because they are trying to do everything themselves.
Yes.
Do you think?
So yeah, thanks for that. I think that is really the crux we need to understand as both as leaders as well as the person who's coming into this role, to really educate them around what this new role is about.
Mm,
And providing the role clarity, I would say, is a very first step. Like, what is my new role, what are my new responsibilities as a manager, and
mm,
how does it differ from being an individual contributor, right? So that's the first step. The second step is really about um, the as part of the new role, the new set of things that you need to be focusing on is really about two or three things, right? One is about the team.
yeah.
Second is about the delivery.
Hmm.
So you're responsible for now a larger delivery, not just your individual piece.
Yes.
And thirdly, it's about like operationalizing your team, right?
Yes.
So defining a set of systems and processes and how things work on your team, like bringing the team together, so to speak. What are some of the your ways of working is another way to think about it. How does your team work, right? What are some of the principles that under which you operate? How do you plan? How do you prioritize? There's a whole set of things that you as a manager are now thinking about. Like, it's more about driving the team, providing them direction, and at the end you're accountable for the results, that you're responsible for the organization business. But it will only happen if you have a very smooth running team, and basically and people are all working together as one team. So your role now becomes more of like getting out of the day-to-day weeds. And if you're spending still, one red flag I would say is for you to catch is if you're spending still time, um, more than necessary to look at code level stuff. And even, I mean, first level management, there is still some expectation to do some coding, but as you grow higher, the you won't have the obviously time to code and things like that. But if you still see yourself getting kind of like gravitated more towards that as those aspect of things, that's also a good way to evaluate. Maybe this is not for me, right? Maybe this is and that's okay. And that at that point you can actually go back and be, but at least you would have gotten a chance to try this role and see what it is for.
Right. And I'm kind of going back to what you said about setting up an operational process, setting up, a bunch of solid relationships, kind of like a managerial system.
Yes.
Because when I think people, the main reason why they kind of feel stressed and feel like they are behind the eight ball is because they don't have a system that sets them up for success. They don't have a system that sets their team up for success.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, I have realized when I coach my clients that it comes down to wanting to be in control. Like we have this
Yeah.
innate need for control. And I think as a manager, if you want to be successful, you need to do the inner work to let go of control,
Yes.
be able to start trusting your team, even if they don't match up to your expectations, even if they don't match up to the kind of standards that you want them to deliver.
Right.
Unless you learn to trust them and be hands off, uh, you're still going to be involved
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. And that will happen naturally too, that you'll slowly start seeing that you probably will not be knowing everything
Yeah,
that's going on in the team. So now you that puts you as you said, like it makes you a little more uncomfortable. And that's where like you can get burnt out if you start getting deeper into everything. So you need to understand the right balance between when you need to be able to need to go deep versus like when you probably have to let the team run with it. So these are some of the things that you'll also start seeing very quickly as you get into the role, that it is now not anymore about like individual delivery, but it's about like making sure all the all the trains are running, and then that's where you add value, right? As a manager, as a leader, is like bringing things together, and really like making people effective in the process. So
yeah,
this is where the people side of things come to play. Like at the same time, one is the team aspect of it, another is the people aspect of it. These two are very different again.
Yeah.
This is another thing, like people probably don't have clarity around, oh, I'm leading a team. What do you mean by people, right? Individuals are different from team again. So you have a set of individuals who are on the team. Now your job is to bring them together, work as a team. At the same time, there's an individual side of each and every one of who's on the team who's very different, who are all don't have the same, I would say, career aspirations or motivations. So they all want to do things differently. How do you now kind of work with at an individual level, right? So this is where having regular meetings, one-on-ones become very important as a manager to really get to know the individual person at a deeper level.
And I
Which,
think this is where also some training is required, because I
correct.
don't think people get trained on, how to
Correct.
build a strong relationship, how to, develop skills like
Yeah.
empathy, how to really get to, work on your own kind of judgments and let them go. Because one of the reasons that people struggle, I feel, is a very common mistake people make is they don't have a really solid relationship with their own manager, their
Yeah.
leadership. So there's a constant. I have clients come up to me and say, "I need to prove that I'm competent."
Yeah.
Right? No,
Yeah.
you don't need to prove anything.
Yeah.
But because when you go with that kind of a mindset, you're kind of playing defense. Whereas really, you want to kind of get to build a strong relationship with your manager. And also, if you find that your manager is not somebody who has your back, then I tell my clients, that's the number one thing you want.
Yeah.
You want a manager who has your back.
Yes.
Then you want to align it with him or her, that you can start uh, focusing on these things that we are talking about, which is growing your team and putting in place some systems. And it's going to be messy. It's not going to be like
Right.
I'm not going to work from day one. But you want to practice patience with yourself. You also want to have the backing of your leaders.
Yeah. You brought up like one of the most important thing, and coming down to what these new skills are. One of the things, it's not so much a skill, but being able to build relationships.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, that's what is the linchpin around this whole management. If you say, is like relationships, not relationship with your team, with every individual on your team if possible. And this is where first level management, definitely you start with a small team, so it should be very much doable to have a good understanding of each and everyone on the team. Then relationship with your peers, and this is where like you are now, because cross functionally you need to have collaborate with your peers, and that's where having that relationship with your peers, and more importantly, and the last one is relationship with your boss.
Right. And
I This is one thing I can tell you that I in my career I know that I learned it. I learned it. Made some mistakes there and things like that. But I know that it's not so much about like um, the boss or the manager don't know what you're doing. It's not that. It's really about like building that connection, that trust, and that happens, and that's where like being vulnerable comes into play, like
mm,
really asking for help. All these become very important. Like it's okay to ask for help, right? And that is one thing, as an individual contributor you are like, that's not you. So as in management and leadership, it's all about like you do first realizing the fact that you will not know everything, and secondly being okay with it, right? And third is really working with your teams and really learning. So the attitude of it shifts to more being, how can I be more curious, how can I ask good questions. This is a
okay, I think we lost Ravi for a second. He's going to come right back. But I'm just going to kind of double click on what Ravi said, because it's so important. He was talking about uh, the importance of practicing vulnerability, right? And this is something that can sometimes be alien in corporate settings. Like, how can I be vulnerable with people, especially when I don't feel safe? So I think there's two kind of call it skills or parameters to look at. One is you need to recognize that vulnerability is a strength at any level, irrespective of whether you're a manager or a director or a VP. Your vulnerability is your strength, right? And it takes courage to be vulnerable. But there's also a second piece in that you need to set some psychological safety. You need to create some a sense of safety where people can feel safe to open up to you, and that can often mean that that can often mean that you sometimes ask for a safe space. And Ravi is back. Welcome back, Ravi. We just lost you for a second. I was just double clicking on something that you said, which is so important: vulnerability, right? Uh, and I was just talking about the need for psychological safety because a lot of people don't really feel safe. What's been your experience in terms of creating psychological safety as a manager?
So yeah, thanks again. I know there was a small blip there. So I think it starts with the culture that you set on the team, and this also is part of leadership and management. Is about like what is it uh, that what's your culture you want in the team, and that starts with who you are as a leader or who you want to be as a leader, right? So for me, it's about like creating a safe space
Hmm.
for the teams to really be open and honest, and you as a leader are also willing to support that kind of mindset, so that anyone on your teams can really come and have a conversation. It can be about anything. So this is where like having open door policies and frequent one-on-ones, having casual off the kind of like unofficial kind of go somewhere out, have a casual meetup and kind of like loosen up a bit. um, give the everyone a chance to really kind of like vent sometimes also. This
Totally.
can happen to like, I mean, you and if you give them that space, they know that it's safe to do it. you'll It'll actually become a lot more easier to build trust. That's which happens along the way. So I feel as a manager, that's one thing, is like creating that safe space and supporting them, guiding them, and showing the way. I mean, this is where leading from the front comes in. Like, you have to be that person who you want your team to be. So it goes back to that. What is that leadership style? And this goes back to like the days of command and control leadership are gone,
That's
right?
yeah,
Yeah, now this is about empathy, compassion, really understanding other person's perspective, and being there with them.
yeah.
Instead of like thinking that I'm working for you, they should feel like I'm working with you.
Beautiful.
And and, and if they, I mean, again, takes time. I mean, not everyone, just it just doesn't happen like that. But this is where you as manager and leader are and this is what becomes your new role, is to really work on that culture. And it
And
starts with that.
I'm going to double click on what you said because I think leaders, in order to create psychological safe spaces, need to practice vulnerability.
Yeah.
When you, as a manager, practice vulnerable moments, share certain insecurities that you have,
Right.
you're giving other people, you're giving your team also permission to share
Yes.
what is truly happening with them.
Yes.
The biggest challenge I face when in relationships is that there is a wall that comes between managers and their teams, right? Or even with managers and their leaders. And the way to actually kind of lower the wall is for you to lead that and create psychological safety. The more you do this, the more your team is going
Yeah.
to feel empowered to open up. And I think that can be powerful. And I think that's uh, in the future, I think this is not going to be a soft skill, but this is a hard skill, and this is
Yeah.
going to be a must-have skill if you want to, uh, learn the skill of being an effective manager and grow leaders under you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the second thing that I was thinking about is also taking that initiative, I would say, right? So also, like, it goes back to always stand up for yourself. That's another thing I learned, is like,
Hmm?
speak up for yourself.
Yeah,
And that comes with a little bit of courage. That's also makes you vulnerable. But we have to take responsibility. This is one thing I learned, is like, there is no one that will do things for you.
yeah,
It is basically, and that's another realization I had. Like, I always used to think like, hey, my manager, if I'm doing good work, my manager will take care of things, right? I mean, yes, that's a good expectation, but but then you are like not taking 100% responsibility. So own your outcomes, be responsible, and then really try to establish that relationship with whoever you need to. And that's where, to build that relationship actually needs openness.
Mm.
You need to be open, you need to be vulnerable, and you need to be, if in some cases you need to be asking for help. Tell me what I'm
Yeah,
right. So
yeah.
those I would say are like become important. Yeah.
And asking for help, I think also, and this is something that I think people don't do enough of, is you want to have, a set of people around you with whom you can be yourself. I think authenticity and self-expression is kind of required for self-care,
Yeah.
right? And Ravi, I want to kind of transition into self-care because we spoke about leaders being stressed, and I think stress is also a factor of not being able to practice authenticity. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a great segue into this, because one of the things we will see invariably, even with whatever we do as managers, you have the best team, you have the best culture and everything. The day to day aspects of the things is definitely a little more stressful, right? Or like, you will feel that. And it comes down to a few things. One is, like, I would say, a need to really, um, time management is first thing I would say is very important. This is one skill that, once you get into management, is like, as I said, like, you cannot be doing everything all the time.
Yeah,
So how do you prioritize, right? So that prioritization, uh, you need to say, like, what is it that I need absolutely myself, I need to be doing, versus where this is where the third skill is delegation,
yeah.
right? So prioritization, naturally, the next skill that comes to is what can I delegate?
Hmm.
And this is also an opportunity for you to grow your next set of leaders, show them the way, work with them, right? So that delegation is one way you kind of gives time for yourself.
Yeah.
And the third one is really about, like, looking at your day, looking at your calendar. Like, Manoj, I think you are the one who kind of gave that kind of insight to me. Is like really understanding where you probably need to be there for the discussions or meetings, and where you can really excuse yourself.
Right.
So really being mindful of your calendar. So this, I would say, is on a day-to-day basis what managers should be thinking of. Lastly, I would say, is one thing is around, like, just from a self-care perspective, like anything, any practice around meditation, mindfulness, practices like these really also help you become a better leader, because you are much more, like, focused. They bring that clarity, the focus, and some of what I talked about is also starts becoming a little more easier, because the right mindset is something that's extremely important as you get into leadership and management, because, like, you will be getting into a ton of things
Yeah.
that, you sometimes will lose a lot of control, or you won't have any control around. And how do you kind of ambiguity, there's so much that stuff is going on, like, so sometimes, like, having something that you can take some break on, and trying to be, kind gives you that space where you gain that focus back. And this is where I would say, like, practices like heartfulness, which I practice personally. I've been doing this for some time now, and it has really extremely helped me. And I a lot of people who know me know that I practice this meditation process. Yeah, any meditation, anything, meditation is like, that's the thing, like, just something that you can kind of give yourself the room and the space for you to reflect on.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to talk a little bit about psychology.
Yeah.
And this is something that I'm noticing a lot with a lot of, especially leaders in tech, leaders and managers in tech. It is that you keep jumping from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. And the real work very often gets in the later half of the day. And very often there's a sense of, I should have done more, or I haven't had a good day. And people don't have like a closing ritual, and they also end up either waking up at
Good
night
point.
or not having a restful sleep.
Yeah.
I think the key is really that our mind hijacks us
Yeah.
when we get agitated. There's a feeling of probably disappointment or even fear, but our mind hijacks us, and there's this infinite loop
Yeah.
of what should I be doing. And when you practice something like mindfulness or meditation, what you are doing is removing yourself from the beer of your experience to kind of looking at yourself as the observer of your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that separation gives a lot of relief. It can
Yeah.
give you space to just exhale. And it's actually an act of loving kindness where you are like giving your body and your mind a break,
Yeah.
uh, so that you can kind of just slowly start being who you are. And very often, when people kind of just, I feel like people are operating from a space of what I call right? When people can just center themselves, kind of come down and relax, very often newer avenues, newer solutions, newer insights will open up for them.
And more importantly, that reflects on your team. That's the thing. Like your presence, your way you handle things, and this is also something like people will see you, and that also is something that the team will catch on, and then they'll feel comfortable about it. Like how you deal with, like, let's say, an escalation, or how you deal with something that's immediate or something very urgent. You're not adding too much stress. How do you handle kind of in a way that you're not making it like a something that everyone has to just be worried about, right? So
Yeah, and I think this is like required. I think every manager needs to get trained in some thing around
yeah.
mind management, because unless you manage your mind, your mind is going to you. And I
Right.
think it's the cause for a lot of angst. And also, I feel like this is also where you want to have some kind of a ritual that closes your day. I feel like one of the things we have gotten really good at is to achieve things, right? To be more productive. But and in coaching world, we call it doing versus being.
Yeah.
People have come more far along in the doing, but because they have attached themselves to the doing, they are not being joyful. They are not being present. They are not being kind of
Right.
compassionate.
Right.
And I think that's the next level of kind of consciousness
Yeah,
that
this is the same thing. The other way to say put it is, missing the forest for the trees,
yes,
right? So you also, this is what you get more into the weeds and lose the big picture.
yeah,
So that's this presence is what I think is what all these practices give you, like being mindful about it, being in the present, and really navigating things in a in an effective way. And as opposed to like you being part of the thing, you have to be outside to see things clearly. So that, I would say, like that clarity and is what some of these practices give.
absolutely. And I think self-care is the core to sustainable success.
Yeah.
Because unless you take care of yourself, I kind of remember this analogy I heard. Like imagine you're a car who's kind of transporting
Yes.
everyone from cross country, right? There's your family, there's your team, there's your
Right.
leadership and organization and community and whatnot. Unless you learn to fill yourself up, right, the car is going to you're going
Yeah.
to break down, and that's
Yes.
going to be detrimental to everyone. So I think like self-care and learning to prioritize your own well-being is super
Yes.
critical to
Good
setting up
point.
yourself for
Yes.
sustainable success. So Ravi, I want to kind of, I think we have gone and touched upon many different areas, right? What do you think? I would love for you to summarize, like what are some takeaways that listeners can kind of walk away with? Again,
Yeah.
don't feel free to add either three or five. Or what do you think are the key
Yeah.
takeaways that every manager needs to
Yeah,
achieve?
I think the key things for me are, first, understanding the difference between an individual contributor and a managerial role.
Yes.
So, very important. Um, Number one. Number two is, like, it's the how you lead your teams, how you manage your teams, is definitely different now. Like, it's going to be more what they are calling it as compassionate leadership,
Yeah.
and
Compassion. Yeah.
compassion and empathy. A third thing is really being about being self-aware,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And fourth one, I would also self-manage. Like, this where it goes back to the stress and all these, right? So these become very important as you in your new role as a manager. And lastly, I would say, like, basically, it's it the single most thing is, like, relationships and trust
Mm.
and people skills. This becomes very important as a manager. So ability to ability to work with people, ability to have relationships, working relationships with peers, boss, people on your team, and building that trust. So those I would say like some of the things that you as a manager need to be thinking.
Beautiful, beautiful. Ravi, I think that's a great summary. And I'm kind of going to just highlight one thing which I think is super important, specific to the relationship. One of my ex bosses had the saying, he said, the art of working is to be able to work with anyone. And it's super hard because there's always going to be certain people, certain leaders who trigger you, who you don't get along with. And this is where, doing the inner work is so critical. I believe that every single manager needs to have couple of mentors at work, and that can include your boss, but have a few outside of your boss as well. And they need to have a coach. A mentor can help you look at different, give you more guidance on how to do certain things. They can focus on the content. Coach can really help you clarify your context, the mindset, the behaviors, the patterns that with which you can approach. So I hope that if you are a manager, whether you are new or experienced, make sure that you get a coach. You also get some mentors because you can't do it alone. As Ravi said, the world is changing. We are now talking. We are entering the era of generative AI, and I think everything that Ravi touched upon, empathy and compassion, and learning to build a system, and learning to surround yourself with great relationships. I think that's the way to succeed and set yourself up for a long haul.
Yep. And thank you, Manoj. I think the last one you touched upon, I would say, is thank. I really want to acknowledge Manoj as well, because this point around having a coach, in my case, I think I've realized it very late, and that's another thing I would say. Like, please invest in some kind of coaching, some kind of help, and that also makes it easy for you if you have someone who's outside of your work, makes it easy for you to share some of the challenges and things like that. So extremely super important for leaders, and any leader, any good leader you'll know of, definitely has a coach.
They don't do it alone.
Yeah, you don't do it, they don't talk about it, there's not like that much that's said. But if you this is where it comes down to understanding your boss, like, hey, what do you do, what is your leadership style? Like, I know when you start getting curious about the leadership side of things, you will learn that they do have coach, and they do have some of the same challenges that you are having. And then that's very much like part of the journey, and then where the coaching and the mentoring really comes into play.
Okay. Ravi, it's been an absolute delight to have this conversation with you. I know whatever you plan to do in your future, you're going to have amazing success, but also you're such a warm and empathetic leader that you're creating more an empathetic culture wherever you go. And I wish you all success. And
Thank you, Manoj, and thank you. This is really Manoj. I think I did my first live here,
yes,
uh, and thank you thank you because for pushing me here. And yeah, I hope listeners have gained something around this 30-35 minutes. But great conversation, and pleasure talking to you as well.
awesome. Thank you so much. And all of you have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.